So how do you succeed at an informational interview? I think you have to be prepared to ask very specific questions. And most importantly is you set a time limit and you stick to it. Most research that I have done say a good time limit is 20 minutes. You ask someone, you network with them, and you say, I would really love 20 minutes of your time. I promise to stick to the 20 minutes. I know you're very busy. And you've set that time limit and you stick to it. Now, the best thing that happens very often, if you're doing a good job in an informational interview, is at the 20-minute limit when you say, thank you so much. We've reached our time limit and I really want to honor that. The person will say, oh, no, I've got a few more minutes. Let's keep going. And that's what you want. That's the moment when you know that this is working for you. And we're going to talk about how you make that happen. So before you go for your informational interview, do your absolute best to research the organization and the individual. You know that there is so much available in our world today with information about before you go in and actually meet them. Know who they are, what they do, what their career path has been, so that you can ask some really good questions. And I know taking a business card may be a little antiquated, especially since probably many of your informational interviews will be online, but it never hurts to be prepared. So I honestly believe that anybody who's in job seeking mode ought to have some business cards prepared. And you know that they're very easy to get at Vistaprint or even at some of the Office Depot will print them for you at very limited cost, but they can be very valuable. You always ask for other interviews. Oh, and Kirk, I love that idea. Put a QR code on your cards. I think that's a great idea. Thank you for that. Always ask for other referrals and then always follow up. And we're going to talk about a lot of these subjects as we go along here. So next, unless you have more questions or anything you want to suggest.
Barb, I know you guys come to this shortly, but be really interesting to talk about the various ways you can follow up and say thanks.
Absolutely. That's one of my absolute things we're going to talk about, because I will tell you, as someone who does a lot of informational interviews and a lot of helping people get to network, it just destroys me when I don't know what happens to people. I really want to know anybody that I do an informational, and I want to know what happens. So that's really important. And then I can become a strong person in your corner for the future. Oh, you're right. Okay. Kirk, you're really a good resource here. Get business cards printed and you can print them right on your own computer. Thank you. Great idea. So one of the questions I'm frequently asked is, should you have, if you're meeting in person, for example, should you have your resume with you? Yes, if you're meeting in person, always have it ready, but don't hand it out ahead of time. Only if you're asked for it as a leave behind, because this really isn't about you asking for a job. This is about you finding out information about that person or that field. But it's always a good idea to have your resume handy. Don't forget to practice your questions before you go. I'm going to give you some practice questions here in a moment that we can talk about. You want to don't stay beyond the time limit unless you're asked. I mentioned that a moment ago, that it's usually great when somebody says, oh, please, I've got a few more minutes, let's keep going. If it doesn't happen, it's not a negative. It just means that you're talking to a very, very busy person. But don't ever stay beyond if you get the feeling that they're not interested. That's reading body language. That is even the words that they can say to you. You can find out whether or not they're interested in keeping going. Don't ask inappropriate questions like, do you have any jobs open in your field? Or is there a job here for me? Those are inappropriate in an information interview. Don't forget to ask for other referrals. And don't forget to follow up and say thanks. And we'll talk more about all of this as we go here. Next. I think the optimum time is to ask for 20 to 30 minutes. It's also very, I think, a good idea to ask if they'd like your questions ahead of time. Some people like to be prepared for what you're going to ask them. And so that means you would have to think through what it is that is going to be on your mind. And I think if they ask if they'd like for that, send it to them. Stay on schedule. Try to be in control of the situation so that when you go in, you say, hi, I'm here. We're going to have 30 minutes at the most. I will stay on schedule. I'll let you know when we get close to the time limit. But I've got a few questions I'd like to ask you to get started. Is that okay with you?
Barbara, it seems like one way of teeing up the end of the interview might be to just kind of let them know, I've just got one more question. Just as you're getting close to your 20 minutes or 20 or 30 minutes, to just kind of tee up the notion that I just have one question, one last question.
I like that. I think that's a very effective way to do it. This obviously means you have to be really prepared for this interview. This can't be one that you go into and you're going to wing it. This means that you really have it mapped out in your mind what it is you want to find out, because you've done your research. You know who this person is. You know what they do. You know how this might fit into to your what you're looking for. And Kirk, you're absolutely right. For those of us who remember Columbo, that is the way he used to wrap things up, but he always had one more question, right?
Sure.
So the research is really a key here, and that's why we live in such an amazing world here where you can learn pretty much anything about as someone who is that you're meeting with. Want to be as efficient as possible so that you're prepared. And certainly we all know that when you're meeting one-on-one with someone who's perhaps someone you don't know, you can never know what's going to happen. So try to be as flexible as you can be as you're being as efficient. I think the worst case scenario I could think of would be if you've got your plan, you're keeping going with it, and the person you're interviewing throws you a curveball. They say, oh, wait a minute, I think I've got something that I'd like to share with you. And I mean, for goodness sake, you want to hear what that is. Don't say, well, I'm sorry, I've got 2 more questions, and then we can get to you. Be flexible, but be efficient. Try to make these at the place and time of the other person's choice. If you're going to meet in person, ask them if there's a place close to their office that they'd like to meet outside the office, or if they'd like for you to meet them at their office, and what time would be appropriate, so that you are making it so easy for them to say yes. And certainly we all know that we can do pretty much anything now over Skype or Zoom, and it can be very effective. It just changes things just a little bit, but I don't think enough to make a real difference. Most importantly here, I think when you're working on your plan for your information interview, is to know what it is. What is your goal? What is your absolute goal? What is it that you want to leave with? And of course, you want to leave with some information that can be valuable for your career, but you also want to leave with perhaps some other people to network with. So don't lose sight of what your goals are.